Okay, good day. My name is Dr. Matt Leach, and I'm going to be teaching you your tree development course as part of your summer transition. So the idea behind this video is just to give you a little bit of a look at some of the things we'll be discussing in class with a visual, if you will, to start with. So the basis of this course is looking at how trees grow, function, and how they develop. And we are obviously gearing it towards softwoods and hardwoods that we use in industry, and just general growth of trees. So the idea behind this video is I'm going to go through a few things about softwoods, and then we're going to move to some hardwoods just to give you some background, and then there'll be more detailed information during the lectures. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at are softwoods, and as you can see behind me, there's some spruce trees, and Ryan is going to pan up and down. The first thing we'll notice, and it's pretty common amongst softwoods, is the conical form of them. Okay, so if we look up and down, you can see that nice conical form. As we'll discuss in class, this relates to how softwoods grow compared to hardwoods. They have a very high apical dominance system in the trees that allows softwoods to grow in this form. Hardwoods, as we'll see, do not have that dominance, so they tend to fan out their crowns. Okay, so it's a totally different growth strategy, which we'll cover. But if we look at them, you can see that form. And as we sort of look up on top of these trees, we can also see that they have cones present right now. It's a cone year for the trees, and so we'll get into the reproductive structures of it as well. And then just by chance that they are in cone this year, we can see the cones on the top of the tree. In softwoods, it's always going to be females in the upper portions of the trees, males in the lower portions of the trees. And this is a strategy to prevent selfing. Okay, so we're going to go into all the reproductive strategies, as well as how trees move things up and down from the root system up to the top of the tree, so in their transport networks. So we'll be looking at how they move liquids and nutrients from the soil up, as well as products from photosynthesis in the crown down the tree. Okay, so if we get a bit closer, do you want to move in? If we move in, what we'll notice is that softwoods have needles, and they're always towards the ends of the branches. Okay, softwoods have a tendency where their needles will last up to 3 to 4 years and then become non-functional because they're too old and they don't produce enough. They cost more to the tree than they produce, so the tree will release them. And so if we look in the inside of the trees here, one thing we notice is that there's literally only needles on the outsides of the branches. The insides are always dead. Not dead, but they have no needles on them. As you get to the top of the tree, the amount of needles on the length of a branch increases from whole branches, and then as you come down the tree, it follows the outer perimeter of the branches where the inside and the outside. And that's for sun exposure, and they have to maintain a certain amount of photosynthetic ability in order to continue functioning and producing for the tree. Okay, so it's a standard. We also look at the stem of these trees. One thing, these are open-grown trees, so we have branches all around the outside. Where the trees are close together, there's no branches internally. Okay, so they're on one side of the tree, and this is basically because of exposure to the sun. So when we get a little bit further in the videoing, we're going to be in a forest where we'll see much more clean stems and less branching. Okay, so open-grown trees carry as much branches as they can to accommodate or to take advantage of the sun that they have exposure to. But at the stem, you'll see that the stems have high taper, meaning they're fat on the stems and they taper up very quickly. This is to accommodate their exposure to wind. Okay, forest-grown trees tend not to have these high taper values, and we'll discuss in class what that means to the plant. And then at the base here, you can see the root system where we are quite exposed because of people coming under here and have you. But what you can see on this particular spruce is quite handily the roots growing in all directions. Okay, and that's a strategy for stability. They'll have these large woody roots that we see here that are barked, and then as you get to the ends, they'll have their finer roots. And when we hit the finer roots, which will tap down a bit, they have the white roots, which do all the absorption. So these ones at this stage, at the older stage, are for structure, transport, and for storage for the plant. They store a lot of their photosynthesis materials in the roots. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to look at when we look at softwoods is the roots, how it grows, the stem system, which is mainly the cambium. So it's a meristem. So the root they call apical meristems. They grow out, give height and extension on stem has a lateral meristem, which is the cambium, and it produces wood. So it gives girth, whereas the apical meristems give length. Okay, and so we'll go through how all that works and how this can be manipulated for forest management. So, this is as much as we need to discuss here. We're going to talk about a lot of it in class. What I just want you to see is how the trees look differently, even though most people have seen it, how the roots look, and then we're going to discuss how these all work together to help the tree grow. And then if we have a different scenario, such as a tight forest, how the trees respond to that. Okay, so we'll pick up at the next forest. Okay, so in continuing with the talk here, we were looking at softwoods. Now we'll have a quick little brief on the hardwoods. As I'm standing here by a birch tree to my left and some ash trees to the right. And you'll notice right away the difference in the structure. The softwoods have that conical form. The hardwoods very clearly have a form where the crown expands very quickly. So it doesn't have a single leader like a softwood where you have one stem running from the ground right to the tip of the tree. You have a stem at the base and then it just fans out up above. And so you don't have that clearly defined pointy top, and you don't have a clearly defined leader. So again, we'll cover this in class, what that difference is and why they're different like that. But the main thing you'll see is multiple leaders. The actual stem itself is not as clean as a softwood in that the branching is very organized on a softwood. It goes in all directions here. And they have leaves throughout the crown as opposed to just on the end of branches. And if you look at a crown, this birch, or if we pan over to these ash trees, you'll see that the crowns are somewhat a lot more open than a softwood, and that allows more light to penetrate them, which allows hardwoods to have a bigger crown in that respect. In the forest condition, we'll see it's restricted to the top of the stem because of light, but you still have a similar structure. Okay, and so that basically is one of the big differences between softwoods and hardwoods, is that general form and how they grow. And we'll see in class, softwoods are referred to as monopodial growth, meaning a single stem with a clear leader. Hardwoods are referred to as sympodial growth, which is a multiple stem with a multiple leader crown on it. Okay, so that's one thing we're going to look at, and how that affects trees' growth and how they fit on a landscape. If we look at the reproductive on hardwoods, it's not as notable in our trees in northern Ontario, or even in Canada for that matter, but they produce flowers, where softwoods produce cones. So hardwoods produce flowers. They can be male, female, or in the case of if they're both, they're referred to as a perfect flower. Okay, and they're throughout the tree, and they rely on things like bees or insects or critters to pollinate, where softwoods strictly rely on wind. So they're pretty much self-sufficient. Okay, so we'll get into that as well. And then if we look at the rooting structure, they're very different in hardwoods. They're not showing as much here. But hardwoods tend to have tap roots, meaning they send a root deep down and then they send laterals off of that. Softwoods tend to have very shallow root systems, partly because of where they grow, but also just the nature of how they've evolved. So a shallow root system, many people have seen a softwood toppled over and its big root mat standing up, and it's maybe about 30-40 centimeters deep. Hardwoods, they tend to break off as opposed to uproot because they have a deep, well-anchored root system. So again, it's a different strategy. Part of it's to do with where they grow, and it allows them to access deeper water. Okay, so the other main thing that we're going to see, or we're going to discuss, is the foliage. Softwoods have needles that can last 3 to 4 years on the trees. Hardwoods have leaves, and in the northern hemisphere they drop them every season and produce new leaves every year. So it's a very different strategy. They have brand new leaves every year, which gives them an advantage because they're new and they're young, so they're more productive than older leaves. But there's a cost, of course, because now you have to produce a new set of leaves every year, which means you have to have reserves in order for that to happen. Whereas softwoods, they produce their new leaves, but at the same time they have older leaves already producing photosynthesis, so they can get a jump on things. Okay, so there's differences, and then again, in the class we'll look at that, and also the fact that softwoods are very much adapted to northern climates. If you look on the map of trees, most of the northern climates on the globe are softwood dominated. If you look in the southern hemisphere, the warmer regions, most of the forests are dominated by hardwoods. And again, it's based on their climates. Hardwoods, as we'll see, are not designed particularly for cold environments. Their cell structure can be damaged by it quite easily. Softwoods have a system in place that helps them protect themselves so that they're more prone to the cold environment. So we'll get into how that happens as well. Okay, so that's pretty much what we need in a general sense to talk about here. And now we're going to move over to some tighter forests to show you the difference between open grown and tight grown forests.